Coming up on today's show.
People have that obstacle to getting organized is because there are these innate fears that they don't recognize in themselves.
And we're going to talk about how you address those fears today and how you can actually take what you might actually be fearing and turn it into a positive.
This wasn't exactly a double-blind medical study. And people are quoting this all the time, even 2 years later, saying, see, because they came up with slightly more creative ideas. If they were in a messy room, it must mean that being messy makes you more creative.
Fears that keep you from getting organized. Today on Keeping You Organized. Hello and welcome to Keeping You Organized. Some people have fears that get in the way from being organized, keeping them organized. And we're going to talk about how you address those fears today and how you can actually take what you might actually be fearing and turn it into a positive so that you can get and stay organized. Joining us is Julie Bestry from juliebestry.com. Julie, how are you today?
I'm doing great, John. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about fear. This is not so much, afraid of being organized, but things that fears that maybe get people, blocked from getting organized. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I think one of the main reasons that people have that obstacle to getting organized is because there are these innate fears that they don't recognize in themselves. And we're going to be talking about a few categories of fear that if people understand what they may be afraid of, they can find a more logical approach to dealing with the emotion behind it.
Yeah, who was it? Teddy Roosevelt that says there's nothing to fear but fear itself. So let's strike it down here. What's our first kind of fear that maybe gets in the way of helping you get organized?
Well, I hear this all the time, and I bet you've heard this on the other podcasts you've done. People fear getting rid of or letting go of things because they might need them someday. So they hold on to things just in case. Yeah. Well, they never get beyond that to think about just in case of what. So for example, when I work with clients on paper clutter issues, it's often a matter of people fearing letting go of receipts, of explanation of benefits and duplicate checks because they say, I might get audited. Well, auditing is a real thing and it's understandable that somebody would fear that. But the fear of getting audited sort of pushes aside the idea of what they would need to do if they were audited. So you have to think about the fact that if you've got receipts for meals and groceries that aren't applicable to taxes, you go to McDonald's. Well, unless you're on a business trip and you've gone to McDonald's, that's not going to be deductible. Explanation of benefits, those EOBs you get from the insurance company, they can help you verify what the insurance company thinks you need to pay, but it doesn't prove to the IRS that you actually paid for a medical expense. And those check duplicates that you have prove that you wrote a check, doesn't mean that you actually gave it to somebody and it got cashed. And go ahead.
No, I was going to say that, I'm just thinking about this because I just got one of those explanation of benefits in the mail the other day. So what do you recommend that clients do? Hold on to them for a short amount of time? And then, what's the organizational system that they can use to, do those things?
Well, we talk a lot about document retention schedules, for example. So that's part. So when we're talking about paper, people fear letting go of something because they might need it. So we walk through and say, okay, under what circumstance would you need it? And we go through, okay, you need some receipts in case you might return something to a store. Well, if the return policy only gives you 30 days, then you're going to keep it in your short-term purchases folder, for example, that might be right at the front of your family filing system. If it's a big ticket item that you may need to get, let's say you buy your wife a beautiful ring. Well, you're going to need to keep that receipt so that you can talk to the insurance company about getting a rider to your policy so that you will be adequately covered. If it's an audit, you need to know by looking at a records retention schedule, looking at the IRS documentation on this, what you need to keep. You don't need to keep that McDonald's receipt. You do need to keep something that shows your actual business expenses. And, it's not just paper. There used to be a superstition that we used to hear all the time that women would hold on to their maternity clothes because if they got rid of them, they would turn up pregnant. You don't see a lot of women in assisted living centers in their 90s being about to have babies. So this whole concept of just in case comes from the fear of being without something they may need. And that fear blocks them from thinking, well, if I did need it, how would I need it? Where would I look for it? And what items would I actually need to use? So you can take that fear and use it sort of as a jumping off point for the next step. So I may need it someday. Okay, if you needed it, what would you do? How would you do it? And that's where a professional organizer, an accountant, anybody, depending on the situation, would be able to sit and say, so you may need your maternity clothes again, but if you're 80, probably not so much. Right. I know you're concerned about your maternity clothes.
Well, I don't want to lose this one tip because my mind is about 30 seconds ago where you talked about this short-term receipts. Because, I know in my filing system, I have like 2015 receipts. And, by the end of 2015, this is a pretty thick file. But so
are you keeping just all the receipts you get, or are you keeping
all the receipts? Yeah, I mean, and I guess some of them are things that I like this concept of. So I guess let me think of it here. So I got this straight. The short-term receipts, you evaluate the receipt before you put it in there, and if it's 30 days or less, if you know you don't need it after 30 days, then you just put it in there, right? Otherwise, what do you do with something like, the big purchase ones you can put in there, I suppose, right? In the other file.
For receipts that you're going to need for your business expenses, and we've talked before about the fact that you don't necessarily need to keep the paper receipt. You can scan it to Evernote or any of a variety. You can scan it to your Dropbox, but have locations for subfolders for each category of receipts that's going to make it easy for you if you don't automatically put it into Mint or QuickBooks or whatever you're using for your business. But if you spend Saturday out and you go to Home Depot and Target and you just run a bunch of errands, okay? For the short term, the reason to keep a receipt would be that you need to take it back. Okay, well, think about that. If you buy a milkshake, you're not going to take that back, let's hope. And so by the time you get home, that receipt can just go away. If you've purchased something that you may return, just having a regular number 10 envelope or a business envelope for receipts and have it tucked in next to your computer or in the front of your filing system so that you can pop them in and once a month go through those receipts. It's also good if you like to check your receipts against your bank statement or against your online bank information.
Yeah, so you have the 30-day kind of rule or 45 days or whatever it is. Yeah, I think that's a really good thing. It'll prevent those receipts from getting into your long-term filing system where they just sit and are really useless.
Absolutely. And again, that fear of what if I need it? I'm going to hold on to it just in case doesn't get beyond that. So let go of the receipt for the milkshake, but keep the receipt for the big drill that you bought for some home improvement.
Right. Okay. So we got that. That's the fear of just in case I need it sometime. What are some of the other fears that you want to talk about that prevent us from getting organized?
Oh, a big one I see is that people who are creative, who work in creative fields, fear that they're having an orderly environment, that getting organized is going to stifle their creativity. They're free spirits and they don't want to become the man. It's a very 60s mentality. So people have posted this on Facebook and Twitter. There was this University of Minnesota study done a couple of years ago where they studied 48 college students. This wasn't a big study, but 48 college students were told to come up with unconventional uses for ping pong paddles. And then half of these students were put in a messy room and half in a tidy room. And there were two graduate students assistants who rated how creative the ideas these groups came up with and compared it based on whether they came up with more or less creative ideas if they were in a more or less creative environment. So this wasn't exactly a double-blind medical study. And people are quoting this all the time, even 2 years later, saying, see, because they came up with slightly more creative ideas if they were in a messy room, it must mean that being messy makes you more creative. But the thing is, creativity comes in a variety of guises. And if you can't find the tools for your creativity, whether that's artistic, literary, photographic, you can't quickly take advantage of those creative spurts. Creativity does require knowledge, passion, inspiration, and all sorts of these ineffable qualities you can't really name. But if you can't find the paint or the paper, or the one memory card for your camera is full and you haven't backed up your computer, so the only copy of your great American novel is on your dying hard drive, clutter is not a friend to your creativity. So John, it's not just a fear of physical order that creates that loss of creativity. People feel that they can't be creative unless they're on horrendous deadlines. You know, people who tell you, I can't be creative unless I'm doing it at the last minute. And so again, research can combat this fear. Timothy Peichel, an expert on procrastination, has reviewed all the research. And what he's found is there's this idea of implementation intention, this idea that I'm going to plan to work on my novel for National Novel Writing Month at 8 o'clock every morning. But people say, oh, well, all the oomph is going to come out of my writing if I have to do it at the same time every day. People, and what Peichel found is that people are afraid of being locked in. They're fearful that if they have to write on a schedule, they're not going to be able to choose to be creative. Except it's not saying they can't also write when the inspiration strikes them at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's just giving them a place in their schedule where they can get that those creative juices flowing. Yeah, and he also found it. Yeah.
Oh no, I was going to say I also I think there's almost the opposite can apply too to certain people where they can't get thinking or doing anything until they get the decks cleared. Maybe that's a different style of person, you know.
Well, and that's true. I personally cannot be creative. I can't write or prepare a presentation or anything if there are things in my peripheral vision. I need to sort of, as you said, clear the decks. And another thing that Peichel found is that when we plan how much plan time to work on something, so the time management part, fearing locking us in, we fear that we're not going to have deniability. So what happens is we don't work or we don't get creative. If we say, okay, I'm going to sit down at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, they're afraid that if they sit down at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning and the creative vision doesn't come, they're not going to be able to say, oh, well, I'd be really creative if only I had the time, because once they've been given the time, they don't do it. And so all of these fears are sort of unknowns in the back of people's heads. When we talk about the fears and we sort of walk through them, my clients say, okay, I'll give it a try. And what they find is just by talking through the fear and recognizing what they're afraid of, they're much better able to sort of boldly go into that environment, because it's not sort of hanging over their head, because once you face your fears, you're halfway to conquering them.
Right. That's great. Well, listen, we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, I want to continue on this subject of fears that prevent you from getting organized. We're with Julie Bestry from juliebestry.com, and we'll be right back. When you've got it together, everyone can tell. Your confidence is obvious. Introducing Viewables.com from Smead. Use the Viewables labeling system to transform your drawer of hanging files into a tidy, organized filing system. Using the premium hanging folder tabs, see the label from the front, top, and back. It's easy. Access Viewables.com from any computer, tablet, or internet-enabled smartphone. Let's make some labels. It's free, and there's nothing to download or install. Choose the label type and format your label just the way you want. You can even add index characters or icons for distinctive filing. Set up a free Viewables cloud account And your secure login lets you save your projects for convenient access from any computer. And with Viewable's multi-purpose labels, you can use one label for any type of file, including hanging folders, top tab folders, super tab folders, or oversized items like notebooks and file boxes. Upload a list of file headings and print your complete set of labels in moments. There's even a library of templates for commonly used label sets. It's never been easier to set up neat-looking files that have easy-to-read headings and efficient color codes. Obviously organized. Viewables.com. From Smead, keeping you organized. We're back now on Keeping You Organized, talking about fears that prevent you from getting organized. And Julie Bestry from juliebestry.com is joining us. Julie, we've gone through a couple of these fears now, and I think, too, a lot of them are backed up by research. Some people use research incorrectly, of course, like we learned to make their point. But what are some of the other fears that prevent us from getting organized?
Well, so many people fear that letting go of something is going to fill them with negative emotions. And I know you have talked to a lot of people on your podcast about the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule, that says that 80% of our success comes from 20% of our effort. 80% of the time, we wear the same 20% of our clothes, and kids play with the same 20% of their toys. So when people fear that a professional organizer is going to make them let go of everything, it ties into this fear that if they let go of something, they're going to feel bad. It's not like the other things we talked about where they fear a practical problem. They feel like they're going to need something just in case. This is the fear that, oh, I'm going to wish I still had that. So when we use the 80-20 rule, we start with, okay, we're not even going to worry about that 20% you're using all the time. We're going to look at going through that 80% that you never put your hands on, that you never wear or play with or touch. And we're going to start not with letting go of things. We're going to start with sorting into categories. So first of all, you take that big fear, oh, I'm going to feel bad if I let go of it. And we don't let go. We start by just categorizing. Well, when you sort things, when a woman sees that she has 7 black skirts, it's much easier to say, oh, you know what? That one doesn't fit, and that one is itchy at the waistline because of that tag. And then they're able to look at it much more in a much more empowered way. Instead of feeling like letting go of this thing is going to make me feel bad because I'm going to wish I still had it, they're saying, I'm making the decision. I meaning the client, not I, the organizer. And that gives them that sense of empowerment over the whole decision-making process. And when we feel like we're in control, our fears sort of fade away.
Totally understand. Go ahead.
So that's a big one. And people also fear letting go of things that they have emotional attachments to. So sometimes you fear that letting go is going to make you feel bad just because, it's been part of your life. But other times we fear letting go of things because it feels like we're letting go of the memory or the person that it's associated with. We tend to over-personalize items. I had a client once who was over-personalizing on behalf of her husband. There was, we were going through a room, and there was this old torn-up quilt, and she said, and it was in pretty bad shape. And she said, oh, but we have to keep this because my husband's mother gave it to him, and he would be very upset if we let it go. And I said, no problem. We worked on. The husband came home a few hours later, walked in, picked up the quilt, and said, why are we keeping this thing that my mother got at a yard sale in the 50s? And he had no emotional attachment, but she had projected an attachment onto him. But in general, we tend to think that we are obligated to feel attached to things because somebody we loved owned them or somebody we loved gave them to us. And so we fear that we're being bad people, bad children, bad spouses, bad friends if we let go of things associated with people, even if it's something that we don't need, that we don't want, and it doesn't fulfill something inside us. So this fear is conquered by talking through how you feel about the person or the memory. I often say, take a picture, it'll last longer. You can let go of the prom dress if you have a picture of wearing it to the prom. If you have joyful memories of the person or the event, you can let go of the item without fear that you're going to forget or be disrespectful to what has come before.
Right. How about things that you spend a lot of money on? That's another situation where people want to hold on to things.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. People have what's called the sunk cost fallacy. I put so much time or effort or money into it, and it's not just tangible stuff. It's why people hold on to broken items and gadgets they ever use, but also to relationships that aren't good for them, to social or professional obligations that don't fit their personality or their schedule. But again, people put so much money or time or effort into something that they feel like they're losing if they don't keep the item. But if you have a broken chair in your house, you can either fix the chair and use it, or you can give the chair away and let somebody else repair it, and it can be a blessing for somebody else. But just keeping something because you spent money on it and you're not using it, you don't enjoy it, you're still out the cost of the money, but now you're out the cost of sort of your emotional labor that you're putting into keeping the item in your home when you could have something that you like better.
Well, that's a great point. We're almost out of time. Do we have any more fears? I want to overcome them all before we're done with the show today.
Wouldn't it be great if we could? Well, Leslie, people fear the unknown, and this sort of encompasses all of these fears. And people fear that just looking at their clutter, going into what some of my clients call the scary room. They'll let me all over their home or all over their office, but won't let me into the scary room or the scary file. They're afraid to look at what's going on. This is the same thing we see when people let their mail pile up or their email and they don't look inside. They know that there might be bills that they need to look at. Well, I say it's kind of like not going to the doctor. You have a pain or a symptom, but you don't go to the doctor because you're afraid of what you're going to find, of a bad diagnosis. And I always use that medical example because people, especially parents, know that if you go to the doctor, yes, there may be a scary diagnosis, but the sooner you go, the sooner you can heal, the sooner you can get healthy. Well, if you're afraid that there is bad news or scary news in your mail about financial things or if you're afraid going through the clutter you haven't looked at in that scary room for a long time is going to bring up bad news, again, the sooner you face your fear and you do it in an empowered way, the easier it's going to be to find solutions. So again, all of these fears come back to the fear of the unknown. What is going to happen if I take this step forward to make things less disorganized? Well, what this is saying is if you take that step forward, you're going to be the one who's empowered. You're going to control your whole environment, and you're going to feel stronger for having done it.
That's awesome. Well, I fear we're out of time here, but I'm not going to let us go until we talk about your business and what kind of work you do, what kind of clients you work with. Do you work locally, nationally, and how people can get a hold of you?
Okay, well, my company, Best Results Organizing, is found on the web at juliebestry.com. That's easy because that's my name. Mm-hmm. I work with residential, home office, and small business clients, primarily in the Chattanooga area, though I do some time management training and coaching by phone. I'm an author. I wrote the book 57 Secrets for Organizing Your Small Business, and I'm currently editing a book for a group of diabetes educators, but I will soon be writing my book on organizing for people with diabetes and parents of children with type 1 diabetes. So there's a little bit of organizing in every little corner of my life.
Well, good. And I think that when you have that book finished, we're going to have you back on because that sounds intriguing, what someone with diabetes. Great. Well, Julie, thanks a lot, and we'll have you back. And folks, now you know you have nothing to fear. So just get started. Take the first step and you're on your way to getting organized. And we'll see you next time on Keeping You Organized.